some of it was about trust, but ultimately I think it was just about the brands taking a risk. But then this year it's been so much easier selling it because we already have the data and we tracked all the metrics. So I think initially, if you're on that stage of we've never done this before, it's just about selling the vision and selling the mission and really just going in and saying this is what we want to achieve.
My guest today is Olivia Mae Hanlon of Girls in Marketing. And in terms of now, when you're looking at the success of the business, what are the tools or metrics that you look at that give you that gauge of what's on the horizon?
I think we still...
Welcome to Founder Metrics by Vested, the podcast where we dive into the world of hotshot business leaders and the metrics that drive their game-changing companies forward. I'm your host, Ifti Nasser, CEO and founder of Vested.
Hi, I'm Ifti, and this is Founder Metrics. My guest today is Olivia Mae Hanlon of Girls in Marketing.
Yeah, so hello. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
You didn't start life as a marketer, you started life as a psych. Why did you switch to marketing?
I think for me, I just didn't realise that marketing was a thing, was a discipline, really. I think that marketing has come a long way in the last few years, especially with the rise of digital and stuff like that. But when I was at, sixth form, college, choosing my options for university, I really love psychology. I love business as well. I kind of love both of them. And I almost think of marketing as a mix of both psychology and business. Yeah. But I didn't really know that, marketing was a discipline. I hadn't done it at A-level. I hadn't ever really studied it before. So I decided to take psychology on with me as my degree. And whilst I was at university that I discovered content writing, blogging, marketing. And once I discovered that, I just fell in love with it and had such a passion for it from day one and decided to make a career in it. But I still do love psychology, but I almost feel like so many elements of marketing have that psychology element to them. So I very much do a lot of stuff within marketing that relates still to psychology now. So I love them both, but I definitely feel like marketing took my heart.
No, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of psychology, marketing, just capturing people is imperative. When you talked about SEO, just picking up on the whole thing that we're doing here, which is about metrics. I mean, SEO is just a minefield of data. How did you actually get into that from...
So I think I definitely started with the less data-led stuff. So kind of the more on-site, on-page keywords, like kind of SEO side of things. And then I started taking some courses. So I did a lot of different kind of online courses that really focused on the different elements. So kind of off-page and some more technical SEO. So I think it was very much a transition for me. I understand that on the offset, just thinking about SEO is quite overwhelming for a lot of people. And I almost say to people within our community and whoever I speak to, think of it like a journey, think of it like a process. Don't just think that one day you're going to wake up and understand SEO, just, inside out. Instead, understand what you know and then what you can build on from that. So for me, it was very much the kind of on-site, on-page, content-led SEO stuff. Then I kind of started learning the off-site stuff. So, backlinks, PR, guest blog, and then off the back of that, then learned a lot more technical stuff as well. So it was very much a process, and it definitely wasn't an easy process for me.
So it seems like you did both sides, both the art and the science of SEO, because I guess it can be quite daunting when you initially talk to people about SEO from a numbers perspective, at least. Going back to your earlier journey and having set up Girls in Marketing, you mentioned that you did that having left your job and without, you told me when we were talking before about not having any savings. I mean, what was that like to do that? I mean, where's that confidence come from?
So I like to self-identify as a calculated risk taker.
Right.
So I like to take risks, but not too many risks. And I always calculate the different outcomes that can occur when taking a risk. So for me, leaving my job meant there was a lot of risks, because there was a lot of financial risks. There was the risk of girls in marketing not taking off, not making any money, lots of different, risks that you have as a business owner. But my way of almost kind of making sure that those risks didn't happen, and I had that kind of solution to any problems, was I found a way to continue to kind of make money and continue to progress in my career, even though I wasn't in a full-time role. So I was freelancing in SEO and in content. So for me, very much about how do I continue my journey, don't really stump the growth of the journey just because I'm not working full time. And also, how do I grow Girls in Marketing at the same time? So freelancing enabled me to have the freedom of growing the company whilst also kind of growing my skill set, growing my connections and my network, and also learning different sides of a business. From freelancing, I learned so much, client face-to-face interactions, how to deal with people, briefs, proposals, all of that sort of thing led into what Girls in Marketing is now. So I think the journey itself, I learned so much from that kind of freelancing journey after I kind of quit my full-time job.
And when you think back to it, when you even started, how did you know that you were moving forward? What was it that you could see? What data did you look at to see whether this was actually worth progressing?
Mm-hmm. For me, I think data plays a huge part in business, in any business. And I seen traction. So a big kind of metric for me was impact and traction of the community. So as much as now we are a fully fledged business, we have a full-time team, we have an office, we are very much a kind of startup and organization. Yeah. At the beginning, it was very much about how much impact can we make.
But how do you measure that?
Yeah, I think you can measure it in a number of different ways. For me, initially, it was the pure comments and feedback that we got from people, who attended things, who not just like the likes and the comments on things. I think definitely comments was a big thing, people commenting on LinkedIn posts or on Instagram posts, or, signing up for our email newsletter. All of those things, those numbers helped. But for me, it was the individual comments of people messaging us and saying, I've attended this webinar, I learned all of these amazing things, or I did this program and I've now got a job in marketing, or I got a promotion or something like that.
How did you track that though, Olivia? I mean, it's one thing seeing those pieces of feedback, but if it's your platform has become very successful, but when you get hundreds of thousands coming in, how do you track and maintain a monitor of that?
So I used a number of different tools. Initially, a lot of social listening tools. So what people were publicly speaking about Girls in Marketing. I think from a private perspective, we just kind of captured that as much as we could. So we have a Google Drive folder with all of the comments that people have made. Sometimes things, go under the radar. We don't catch them, but our aim is every project that we do, and we did this from the beginning as well, we always create a folder in, Google Drive, and we screenshot, messages and comments, and we put those into a Google Drive according to what project it is. So whatever project we're kind of running at the time, we have an individual folder for that, and we can go in and see. But a lot of the time, these private messages go on the radar because we've got to actively, it's really hard to track those kind of metrics, which is why I kind of used a combination of those like social listening tools, understanding how people were speaking about our brand. This is what people were saying, in private messages.
Yeah. Which tools specifically, Olivia, just so that people, because I mean, there's so many people who are going to be listening to this will not know the tools that you're talking about, and it'd be great to just share some of the ones that you use.
Yeah, so at the beginning, I used Mention. So Mention was a big thing for us because they had, I'm not sure if they do now, but they had a free plan, which allowed me to kind of get on board in an accessible way as well. And then ended up kind of paying for that. The problem that you have with Mention, especially when it comes to LinkedIn, is that it can't track what personal people are saying on LinkedIn. So that is like quite a big issue that I've had, is how do we measure the impact of individuals talking about us on LinkedIn, which is why we kind of have to take the approach of putting them all into a Google Drive. We also use kind of project management tools as well. So we use Monday.com to add in different individual testimonials that we find, ones that are maybe more significant, or ones that talk about something in a really nice, and like if it's a really good story that we can really like love and kind of show the impact of what we're doing, we'll put that in a separate place in our kind of project management tool as well. But Mention was a big one at the beginning, for us specifically.
Brilliant. And in terms of now, when you're looking at the success of the business, what are the tools or metrics that you look at that give you that gauge of what's on the horizon? Where the opportunities are coming from. How can you see them, or even the dangers? What do you use to help you see that horizon?
I think we still use a lot of the same kind of metrics as we have before. We are massively, obviously, tailored towards our community around impact. But I think now we obviously have to look at those more traditional kind of KPIs, things that, you wouldn't necessarily have focused on before. Having a team now, we have to focus on, okay, how do we create impact with brands? So we work a lot on campaigns with different marketing software type brands, where we do a range of different things for them. So depending on their objectives, we allow them to access our community. So for example, a brand may come to us and say, we want brand awareness. So then for them, their APIs are obviously different to a brand who comes and says, we really want trials and sign-ups. So the kind of metrics change depending on, the brand that we work with, and on that specific campaign, on that project. I think generally as a business, for me, it's about seeing that sustainable kind of growth. I am not somewhat, from a financial perspective, I'm not someone who, wants to necessarily reach 10 million in the next, 2 years or anything like that, but seeing that growth over time, even if it is just small steps financially. Okay, we've got this contract, or we've had this many new people join the platform, or anything like that. Those smaller metrics and that sustainable growth is really important for me from a financial perspective, and just knowing the numbers financially as well is so important.
So what are the key numbers then for you? Is it recurrable revenue, sales, month-on-month growth? What really makes it for you, and for you to feel that sustainability is coming? Because everybody will have highs and lows. What's the things that give you that comfort that things are in the right place?
I think definitely monthly recurring revenue are huge, but because we work on a bit of a weird kind of business model, we obviously have our membership, and we have our courses that we run, so we have some sort of like monthly recurring revenue. We also do work with brands on kind of partnerships over quarters as well, so it's not always as easy to just map out monthly recurring revenue, because we also sign on brands for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So we kind of like mesh it all together, put it into almost kind of like an ARR, so like annual recurring revenue instead, and then just kind of like split that up between the month. So it kind of is monthly recurring revenue, but it's not, because we might not necessarily get the same amount every month. We may see, a big contract come in 1 month and then not have another one for 3 months.
So do you see anything, any correlation? You talked a lot about impact. and share of voice stuff. So do you see any leading indicators from impact signals that you see, let's say today? Does that relate to prospective MRR or ARR 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line? Can you see those correlations?
Yeah, I definitely think you can, but it is so hard to track. I mean, I know anyone out there who's listening who, does a bit of marketing will understand it's so hard to track kind of life cycle of customers, and it's so hard to understand, how much impact actually has on the business and has on the numbers themselves. I definitely think that the impact doesn't correlate directly with the business and the numbers, because I think that we have a huge reach. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I thought that the girls in marketing team was so much bigger than it is. We do so many things and we have, a really good team behind us, but we're not huge. There is only 6 of us. So I think sometimes the numbers and the impact can actually not go in your favor, because people think that you are, bigger and you can do bigger things. Whereas we're, the 6 of us are just there saying, oh, we can only do so much. So it is difficult, because I don't always think that the public numbers that you kind of see and the impact that you see doesn't always necessarily relate to the numbers and the finances, because we have a lot of people who really are impacted by what we do, but they maybe don't have the finances to invest in our membership. Maybe they don't have the time to invest in our membership or in our products. So sometimes people like to support our mission and be impacted by our community, but they don't necessarily give us money or give us that kind of recurring revenue. But that to me doesn't matter, because if they go on and refer us to one of their friends, or they talk to their manager about us, who then gets in touch about sponsoring an event or something like that, I think it's not always about those people directly and how do they create money. It's about the kind of wider impact and how that does relate, which is so hard to track.
It is, but I guess somehow you have to either have a second sense or something, because none of it, as you were saying yourself, Olivia, we don't have lots and lots of time. Time is limited. So how do you then determine which things you're going to spend your time on? Because you want to maximize the impact. Impact is sort of tangible, sort of intangible. So how do you then decide what is it that you use? If it is just your secret sense or whatever, then that's it. But what can you share with others that you use to gauge where you're going to spend your time and effort and endeavour?
I think it's a mixture of impact and also kind of revenue and growth for the business. So the projects that make huge impact and make a difference on people's lives, but equally allow us to grow our business, from a sustainable perspective. So last year we run a digital marketing internship program, which was a 3-day free kind of virtual program that anyone could access across the world. We ran that free for the end user, but we had sponsors on board. So we had 2 main sponsors who essentially they had a session within the program where, they added value to the end user's life, but very much first their kind of tool at the heart of it. So it was 2 kind of marketing software brands. And we measured impact through that from obviously user-generated content, so people talking about the program, people post about the program, people actually just generally get in touch with us and everything like that. We measured user-generated content was huge. We measured mentions, as I said before, so people talking about us. And we also, so from our side, we also measured how many members we got off the back of the program, how many people, followed us, the kind of follower growth that we had on social. And then from a brand perspective, so one brand was very much focused on brand awareness. So they just just wanted as much impact as possible. So for them, we focused on the user generated content. So within the program, we did a task where the end user, the attendee, had to log onto the platform, the kind of software, and take a screenshot of, something, post it onto LinkedIn or onto Instagram, and then they kind of got entered into, a prize draw type thing, and they had to say something that they loved about the platform. So they got tons of user generated content, tons of brand awareness from that. And that's something that, unfortunately, because it was on LinkedIn, we had to, as a team, individually go in and literally screenshot every single piece of user generated content. So it was very much approximate for them. And we made them aware of that at the beginning and said, it's really hard to track the metrics on LinkedIn. I know it's got a lot better now. LinkedIn now has kind of in platform analytics, so it is a lot easier to track now, but then it kind of wasn't. And then the other brand that we worked with was very much focused on getting kind of sign-ups and getting kind of link clicks. So we used a track link with them. They tracked obviously how many people went on the page, how many conversions, and it's estimated that it was kind of around 3,000 accounts were set up and used, and off the back of that they got around 50 paying users off the back of that in of itself. But another one of their objectives was actually not just link clicks and sign-ups, but longevity of customers. So they knew that they were investing in a program that was for kind of more junior to mid-level people. So they said, we might not get the impact now, but it's the impact that we'll get in, 2, 3, 4 years when these people are the managers and are the ones who are going to buy the product.
Yeah, but how do you manage to sell that? Because if it's always about jam tomorrow, so when these brands come to you, do they say, because they know what the leading indicators are, they say, I want, as you're saying, users signing up or mentions, or do you suggest to them what the best metric for assessing the success of a campaign is?
It's a mixture. It's very much a collaborative effort, really. I think I always go in and say, what's your objectives? What do you want to do? And then I, tell them of the upcoming things that we have going on and how it may align with our objectives. But ultimately, if they want something that we can't give to them, I'm not going to sell it to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing and I know I do speak to a lot of founders who just sell whatever they can and then they deliver afterwards. But I would never sell something that I didn't know we were going to be able to deliver on. So I knew that the internship program was a risk. And that is something that when I was speaking to sponsors and partners about, I explained to them, we did it at a relatively cheap sponsorship price. And I said, it is a risk, but I think that this is going to be the impact of it. And I think one of the brands was a brand that we'd already worked with before. So they already trusted us. And they very much, we still work with them now, and they signed on to do the internship program again this September, which was really great. And I think that some of it was about trust, but ultimately I think it was just about the brands taking a risk. And I know I obviously mentioned there was 2 brands involved. I spoke to probably over 50, 60 different brands, some huge brands who I know would have absolutely loved the impact and, would have definitely had an impact on their brand, but a lot of them weren't willing to kind of take the risk. But then this year, it's been so much easier selling it because we already have the data and we tracked all the metrics. So I think initially, if you're in that stage of we've never done this before, it's just about selling the vision and selling the mission and really just going in and saying, this is what we want to achieve and we want you to believe in this mission with us. And we were just really lucky that we had 2 really amazing quite big brands that did believe in what we were doing, and I think sometimes that's just something that comes with time. The more people and brands that you speak to, the more you refine your pitch, the more you can sell it. Talking
about impact, you've you've had quite a lot of impact yourself and a lot of success. You've won Woman of the Year award for Merseyside last year, and you're on the future list of 2023 for the Northern Power Women Awards. What that impact, getting awards is brilliant. Have you been able to see how the success, your personal success in those awards and that of the business, translates into new business for you? Have you ever tracked that? Is it something
it's not something that I've ever really tracked, to be honest. It's not something also that I've tracked if it does bring new business. I almost think for me, awards is maybe credibility. I would say, especially within the business world, I would track it more with the more kind of credibility that we have as an organisation and that I have as an individual will eventually somehow relate to other things, because I don't necessarily just track it from a kind of business perspective, also from a personal brand perspective. So the more kind of speaking opportunities that I have, or the more I kind of am, able to or asked to go on podcasts and stuff like that. So I've never really tracked direct business, but I almost see, kind of awards and stuff like that more related to personal brand. We have never actually won an award as Girls in Marketing before, so that's something that maybe if we did do in future, that it would be interesting to see the impact of that.
That's really interesting, that credibility assessment or a metric around credibility, because there's lots of things that go into that. Firstly, there's the personal credibility of the founder and the individuals on the team. Then, as you say, about the business itself, any licenses or accreditations it has. Are you aware of any credibility metric or thing that's out there? Because one would imagine that there should be some sort of correlation for that, because I think that's a really powerful thing. You don't have, nothing is directly tangible, but even if it's indirectly tangible, the credibility ranking must be something you can measure.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say that there's any particular metric. I think for me, it's about going into a room of marketers and people knowing who your brand is, and people knowing what you do. So, for example, we kind of exhibited an event recently that was totally free. We did not pay for it because they just wanted us there. They wanted our brand there, and they asked us to go and do some like really cool kind of brand activation. So we did that, and the amount of people, so it was a marketing event and it was for kind of 400-500 people. We were the only stand in the room. It was like networking kind of room, and the amount of people that came up to us and already knew who our brand was and what our brand did, and who we were. That for me, I don't know if you can necessarily measure it from a metric perspective, just from a face-to-face, this is crazy metric. Like people genuinely say, oh yeah, I follow you on LinkedIn, or oh yeah, I've bought a training course before, or I've part of the membership, or anything like that. I think that for me is that credibility element, and that's something that we see more of. I think another thing is when people compare us to other communities or other kind of training courses and say, oh, I was part of this other membership, but I've joined your membership because I think that it's better. Again, that for me, that it's that people giving you kind of that feedback that is really important. And I think that only really comes from speaking to your audience and speaking to your customers, which I think so many business owners don't do. You just kind of get in a bubble of my product or my service is perfect and I don't need to speak to anyone. But actually going outside of that bubble and just speaking to people who maybe aren't customers who aren't people who would ever purchase from you, but what is their perception of you? How do they see you? And at that event that we were at, where we exhibited the other week, I also did kind of speaking, a talk there as well, and it was all around brand perception. And I wasn't a keynote speaker. They had multiple keynote speakers there who were absolutely amazing. I was just kind of a smaller speaker on the day. But at the end of the day, one of the event organisers came up to me and said, "Your talk was the most attended talk of the day." And again, that for me adds credibility, because that's people who are saying, "Oh, the keynotes, people are coming to see me," which I think, again,
that is fantastic. I mean, you should take a bow for that. I think just going back to what we were saying in terms of credibility, and I agree, there's no individual metric that's going to give you it. But it certainly inspired a thought about some sort of little algorithm that you could build up that takes all those different elements that you talked about, see how you can create a credibility index or matrix, metric of some kind. That's really inspiring, actually. I'll take that away with me. So I guess we're getting to the end of time on this, but it'd be great to hear where do you see Girls in Marketing going over the next year or two?
We really want to continue doing more things as much as we can do, but get better at what we're doing as well. So I think that actually tracking that data and metrics is so important for us, making sure that we can deliver on things, but we deliver on things consistently. We want to definitely do more in-person events, but again, it's really hard to track kind of metrics and successes of that. In-person events has been something that we have done and have been relatively successful. We've always sold them out. People have always enjoyed them. But from a business and a financial perspective, we've lost money on most of the events that we've done because we haven't had a sponsor, and because we make them quite accessible from a money position. So it's literally like £20 per ticket. It means that we don't make any money from them. So I think obviously going back to what we were talking about before on measuring impact versus kind of finances and revenue, that is part of the model that we haven't really refined yet, and we need to really think about, okay, how do we know we can make impact, and that's amazing, but how do we now make it sustainable and grow it as part of the business as well? Because at the moment it's not something that does make any money, but we know that if we have maybe brands on board, we have sponsors on board, that's how we can kind of grow it even more. I think that's kind of the future, is really figuring out the avenues that we've tried and trying to make them more successful from a financial perspective.
I guess with increased credibility, more brands will be wanting to join or participate with you, and indeed then even sponsor, which ultimately, as you said, is where it's going to make a difference for you. I mean, at the moment you're based in Liverpool, but how broad is your business and customer reach?
I mean, it's global. I would definitely say our big customer reach is the UK, so just literally across the UK, but I know that we do have people from all across the world. The brands that we've worked with have been all across the world as well. But I would say the biggest kind of impact that we've had and the biggest place our customers are and people are is probably the UK, literally all across the UK, because we grew online. So, it's not one place. I would say that we don't really have a big community in Liverpool. We have a huge community like London, Manchester, Scotland, but it isn't really something that we have in Liverpool. But I do want to build that. So that's something we're working on as well, is building more of kind of a northern community as well. It's just having the time to do everything.
Yeah. And do you think that's location makes a difference in terms of your reach? Because it is education that you're providing through the platform. I guess being UK, does that actually make it more powerful for you to reach people here? Or do you genuinely feel that it is geography agnostic?
Yeah, I think in a way, knowing the UK market is really important from a marketing perspective. So I think we could be global from like a kind of platform, because it is an online platform. You can log in from anywhere. But I think the kind of things that we teach are more UK specific and do focus more on the UK. So if we were going to go more global and focus on other markets, we would have to think about the content that we produce as well. So predominantly we are trying to really focus on the UK right now, and then kind of decide, what other angles and what other kind of countries we want to do. We definitely have a customer base in the US and Australia. They're kind of other big countries. But again, the kind of market in marketing is different in the US, I know. So it's, really cracking the UK market before we can move and diversify.
And what's exciting for the rest of this year? What's the end a good year for you look like now from a metrics perspective? What are the things that you're going to look at? Is it just the MMR? Is it about the team size? Yeah. What's it going to be?
I think the projects that we're working on right now are really exciting. As I said, we're really trying to refine the event side of things. So that's something that we're going to be investing in from a team perspective, and also from a kind of time and effort perspective of the rest of the team. And I think for me, we are obviously doing our internship program again. We're also doing a virtual conference, which is going to be more focused on leadership in marketing. So I'm really excited about those things and doing those projects. We want to do more projects like that, but obviously we have to have the brands that are invested in those projects as well. We also have a podcast, and that's something that we really want to focus on. We're nearing 100,000 downloads of the podcast now, and we don't have a sponsor, which is, I speak to so many people and they say, why do you not have a sponsor? But I think it's really hard to, again, track how successful a podcast is according to, downloads and, sponsorships and stuff. People don't understand the value that being a sponsor of a podcast is. So I think it's a really hard sell for a lot of brands. But on top of that, it's something that we really want to do. We want to kind of get on board and have a sponsor on board our podcast that is really invested in our mission, in reaching those people, everything like that. So lots of exciting things in the pipeline. And I think that metrics definitely comes into it a lot, and making sure that, we're tracking the success of those metrics, because I know that at the beginning of my journey, maybe I didn't track the metrics as much as I should have. And I think now as a business, so important to it.
Absolutely. But you've got 100,000 downloads of the podcast. Mm-hmm. Do you know the nature of the people who've downloaded it? What do you know about the individuals who've downloaded it? And how can you use that information to maybe target the appropriate sponsors?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the information that we know is quite limited, because that is something that we haven't done a research piece individually on, and the platforms that are podcasting platforms. So we use Anchor, which is now being bought by Spotify. So It's just called Spotify for Podcasters. That gives you quite in-depth kind of demographics. So we know our audience is majority female, which, I mean, it's a given with the name. Exactly. We know a general age range, which kind of, I think it's 23 to 34. So I definitely, but that is only the demographics from Spotify listeners. But actually the majority of our listeners are on Apple Podcasts. Right. But unfortunately, Apple Podcasts doesn't have anything like Spotify does, so you don't know who's listening. We would assume, which maybe you shouldn't do this when it comes to metrics, but we would assume that it is pretty similar, especially if you consider the audience that we have on social media, the people that are within our kind of membership, the people that buy our products. It's all very similar. So it's kind of women, 23 to 34, based in the UK, those types of things. So it's now finding a sponsor that wants to focus on those.
All right. So rather than who do you think, who would be, if you had 3 sponsor opportunities out there, who would be the best 3? Give us some brands.
I think the best brands would be ones that are kind of definitely on our mission, but not necessarily from a marketing sense, because our audience are not just marketers. They're women, they're professionals, they're people with lives. So I think we're going down the angle of getting more like feminine hygiene brands involved. So even like apps. So Flow is a really good one. It's a period tracking app. Any kind of menstrual product, like Tampax even, loads of like really cool brands like that. Maybe some that are a little bit different. So we're looking into Estrids, who are like kind of the razor shaving brand, or Wild, who are like the deodorant brand. They'd be really cool. We are very like invested in that sustainable mission. So anyone like that. I think those types of brands would be really cool. Or equally, any brands who want to have that exposure to a professional audience. So your HelloFresh, your Gusto, those types of things, because our audience, as I said, they're not just marketers, they are women. They're living their life, they're all of those different things. So I think it'd be really cool to work with a brand who is on a similar mission to us and who we just love. We love working with brands that we use what they, their product, or we use their service, and we like to kind of live and breathe it and almost become brand ambassadors. So that's a mission I'm on at the moment.
Well, it'd be brilliant if somebody from Wild or Tampax or Flow or even HelloFresh are listening to this podcast and think, actually, that would be great. We need to reach out to Olivia and see if we can sponsor them, because they're talking exactly to our market.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, definitely give me an email.
Brilliant. I think that's been such a brilliant conversation, Olivia, and learnt a lot about you and your journey, and how you having a business that you've created from nothing now has 6 folk that you are looking after as a consequence, and I just wish you every success going forward and lots of sponsors.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Founder Metrics. Remember, even the biggest of ambitions are within your reach when you leverage the right strategies and metrics. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and never miss a future episode. You can visit vested.com, Founder Metrics, for additional resources, articles, and exclusive content. Join our growing community of entrepreneurs and founders by following us on LinkedIn or X. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Together, let's continue to unlock the metrics of success, sharing, and create a brighter future.